Hey, what's up, Shining Otaku? Today we have a dynamic comic creative known for their award winning autobiographical work, And Then One Day. He's also been a judge for the Eisner Awards. He's also done other notable works that may include like Coin Op Carnival, A Hunter's Tale. He also teaches comics at Michigan State University and has curated comic shows. Today we welcome the award-winning and Eisner-nominated comic artist and professor Ryan Claytor to the show. Hey guys, thanks for coming on today and checking out this interview. Of course, like I said previously, we have on Professor Claytor today here to be able to just talk about some comics and just dig in. So, of course, Professor Claytor, with your history of being in comics, and you've gone to, of course, a number of different conventions, and you have like a real history when it comes to comics. But when I look at your art style, I'm very curious, like where were some of your inspirations from? Where did you where were your influences when it comes to art and writing? Like, can you talk a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, sure. That was a real blast from the past you just pulled up there. That was 20 years ago I made that. Anyway, first of all, thank you so much, both Irvin and Mark, for having me on today. I really appreciate being here and chatting with you both. So thank you. As far as influences are concerned, man, I feel like I wear him on my sleeve. I love Sergio Aragonés. He's done work for Mad Magazine for over 50 years at this point. He's done a creator-owned comic called Gru the Wanderer for 40 years now. And he is just like unstoppable. He's like 88 years old right now and he's still cartooning. Like that's the dream. Like I want to keep doing that. I want to be him. I am nowhere near as prolific as he is, but it's like a dream to shoot for. So I love the work of Sergio Aragonés. Let's see who else. I really enjoy the work of Emil Ferris, Lucy Knisley, Andy Watson. He's an artist from the UK. Gosh, how much time do you guys have?
You can keep
Craig
going.
Thompson, I'm a big fan of Blankets, and he's done a few other books since then. Just came out with Ginseng Roots recently, and that was really interesting because prior to Ginseng Roots, he like basically hides away for a number of years and then drops some giant brick of a book on everybody and like, here's the next thing. But he serialized Ginseng Roots through Uncivilized Comics. And I was on that, oh gosh, what do you call that? Words are already eluding me. A subscription to that comic where they just show up at my door whenever they're released, which was beautiful. I love that. I don't even have to think about when they're coming out. Right. So I was on that track, and they just got released through some big pub. I'm trying to remember if it's Pantheon or somebody who collected all those into a single version just this year. So I just saw Craig Thompson at Comic-Con International just this past month. That was his last stop of his tour before he heads off to Barcelona. And so I love his work too. His work on Ginseng Roots was so inspiring, both in subject matter, but also in format. Like, it felt like he was at war with the traditional rectilinear comics panel. Like there was almost no panels to be found. They were all these like implied scenes that bleed into one another, but at the same time it was totally readable too. It was just amazing. I urge you to go take a look if you haven't seen them yet. But those are a few influences.
No, I love the fact that you mentioned Comic-Con International, because I know you were just there recently, and I know you were nominated. Something that somebody doesn't normally get. You were nominated for an Eisner.
Yes, that was a huge feather in my cap. I have literally been applying for the Eisner Awards for 20 years, and that's the first time I got a nomination. So that felt really good. I did not win, but I was the only self-published work in that category, so that felt like a big win to me.
Right.
No, I would say so. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like when I think about like like getting nominated for like an Eisner and what the process that it takes into that, like what I guess when you decided you wanted to try to apply for an Eisner this time around, like what did you just apply for the category of like best publication design, or how does the process actually work with being able to, I guess you could say, rise up and be able to reach that point? You know, if you're someone who's aspiring to get into comics and you actually want to be able to be nominated for something like that.
Sure. Well, I can tell you exactly how it works because I was an Eisner judge the year prior. So I feel like it's this veiled process, but here's how it works. There's half a dozen judges that are selected, and they are from different types of involvement in comics. It could be creators, it could be librarians, it could be shop owners, it could be academics, it could be a mix of those things. I was kind of a mix. I was the only creator, and I was one of a couple academics on the panel as well during my year. And basically, these half a dozen folks, they get together, and there's 30 some odd categories in the Eisner Awards, and there is no human way to read everything that is submitted, everything that came out in 1 year of comics. It's just too much. And so what we did was we divided up the categories. Basically, every person would take like 2 to 3 categories that they would say, they would volunteer, okay, I'm going to read everything in this category. And so I'm trying to remember, I think it was memoir, nonfiction, and humor were my categories. And there is no singular category that has only one judge in it. So every category has multiple judges reading everything, like at least 2, sometimes 3.
Wait, so does that mean that there's more judges than maybe what's listed? Is there like other like secret judges, or is it the same ones that you see people just kind of double up on?
It's the same 6, but every one of the 6 have multiple categories, so everybody reads.
They're assigned to multiple categories.
Okay. And then there's also categories that don't need to be read, like cover artist. We just all get together at one point, which I'll tell you about in a second, and say, okay, let's look at these covers. But as far as the categories that need to be read, everybody takes 2 to 3, reads everything. Then those readers say, okay, so that's our initial charge. And then about, let's see, I think it was late April or so of the year that I did it, they fly out the half a dozen judges to San Diego. They put us up in a hotel and they sequester us in this room where, you walk in for the first time and it's like simultaneously comics nirvana, but also like the most overwhelming room you've seen, because like there's just shelves and shelves and tables of books laid out all over the place, and you enter and you're like, oh, how do we even make our way through all this? But essentially we've kind of been doing it already before we got there. So like I would take a category of dozens and dozens and sometimes hundreds of books and say, all right, this is the cream of the crop that I think rose to the top. And then the other judge in that category would say, well, here are some that you don't have that I think should really be considered. And then we'd discuss them and say, well, I think this one was problematic because of X, Y, and Z. Maybe we should, take note of that, etc. And then our pile combines, and then we present that to all the judges who over the course of the weekend say, okay, now I'm reading the cream of the crop from every single category so that we can all come together in the latter part of those like 4 days or so that we're all together, and then accurately vote on the nominees. So we, the judges, vote on that and put forth 5 nominees, usually 5. Sometimes there was like a tie and we'd say, well, are we voting off or are we including a 6th? So it would be typically 5 nominees for every category. And then it's basically out of the judge's hands at that point. Their job is to put forth nominees. Then those nominees are announced And all industry professionals, if you've worked on comics, if you've edited comics, if you're a librarian of comics, if you're a professor of comics, if you have some involvement in the comics industry, then you have a vote. So then it goes out to comics professionals and the votes come in, and then they're announced on the big Eisner Award night, which happened, Friday of Comic-Con just recently. For me, Friday of Comic-Con every year it happens. So that's kind of the process behind how the Eisners are selected. But that was my experience in 2024.
So how are the judges selected? And then more personal to you, how was it like when you actually got selected to be a judge? Like, can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah. So the Eisner Award Grand Poobah for many, many years is named Jackie Estrada. She has held this down for literally decades.
I've heard of her.
And she just retired from her Eisner position this year. So she announced that at the Eisner Awards, and there's going to be another person taking her place. But essentially, for these past umpteen years that Jackie was doing it, Jackie was selecting folks and trying to get sort of a diverse range of people and interests and involvement in comics so that there's a lot of different voices coming to the table for the judging. Yeah. But as far as I was concerned, when she asked me, I was ecstatic. Like, that's a huge honor to be asked to do that. But then I started asking questions and I said, hey, I'm submitting something in the Eisners this year. Is that going to be a conflict of interest? And she said, yes. If you're submitting, you cannot judge, or if you're judging, you cannot submit something. Right. And so I said, okay, is it possible to defer this judgeship until I'm not submitting something? And she said, yes, that's just fine. So I waited until a year that I did not have a publication, and I contacted Jackie and I said, hey, you know what? I think this is my clear year. Are you willing to have me back? And she said, yes, that'd be great. So 2024 was my year to judge. And then I was back submitting my work in 2025. And lo and behold, it, swung my way for once, for the first time in 20 years.
Wow. Okay.
Kismet, in other words.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Kismet, in other words.
Definitely, for sure.
Now, I didn't know if you had something to say, Mark, before I, moved
Oh, no. So I was going to ask you, when you were talking about this room, this Shangri-La of comics, I was going to ask you if it felt like you were in a jury room in a high-pitched court case.
So, like I said, it was really a mix, because on one hand, like, you and me, we love comics. Like, comics is what we do. And so seeing all those laid out is exciting. It's like walking into a comic shop. It's full of possibilities. I want to dig through them and find the treasure. But at the same time, you're in for a big job. Like, this is, it felt like pressure. And it was also the most comics I had ever read in 1 year. Because remember, leading up to those 4 days where they fly you out to San Diego, you're saying, hey, I'm going to read every comic in this category. Hey, Jackie, can you send me these books that I haven't read for my category? And then more would pour in. And you'd say, hey, send me those 2, please. And so you're reading up a storm before you get there. And then when you get there, okay, so they put you up in a hotel. I was trying to remain active, and so I'd go down to like the treadmill in the hotel, workout room, and I'd be bringing comics with me, and they'd be sitting on the treadmill, and then I'd shower, and we'd go to the Shangri-La of comics. I like that.
That's what it is.
We're reading nonstop. We're talking nonstop, and then we go have dinner, and then we're back to our hotel, and we're all reading till midnight or after. It was just like we were being force-fed comics. So it sounds like a real privilege, and it is, to get to see and read all those comics. But at the same time, it's almost like how when you're in school and you get assigned a book, and even if it's good, you're like,
it's still a book that you're assigned to.
It's a sign. It's a sign.
It still works. Yeah, right.
And so after that, I was like, whew, I don't want to see a comic for I
Nah,
don't know how long. And that's the first time in my life I've felt like that, because I'm going
you're one of those guys who walk. So for a couple of days, you walk right past the comic shop.
yes, for a few days I didn't even walk past it. Yeah, for
Oh
sure.
no,
So-
that's great.
So, like, do you feel like your background in teaching like helped with when you were looking over comics, like almost like you're looking at it, as a professor, as opposed to maybe looking at it like, how maybe someone else might look at it, like your average reader?
Right.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have to synthesize information in a way that makes it easily understandable to students. But then teaching this class over the past, 17 years or so, I've learned a ton from students, from seeing what I thought would be a good way to synthesize information that really wasn't. And I've altered my way of teaching to make it better and to make it easier to understand. So yes, definitely. Teaching has taught me a lot too. So absolutely.
Yeah, because I just keep thinking about, I was like, with what obviously, with you teaching and everything, I'm like, I can imagine when you have different types of comics coming in, everything isn't going to be your flavor of maybe what you might like, but you still have to be able to judge it,
For sure.
And that, I think that I feel like could be very hard, but at the same time, I'm sure, it probably, is like a unique challenge behind that too, being able to go through that, because it's not just judging someone's content, maybe who is, just starting out and they're learning the basics. It's like you're judging content of, in some cases, some people who are masters of their craft, and having to be able to look for, how they measure up against someone else who's also a master.
Right. Yeah, it's true. And, shifting to teaching for a second, you were talking about being able to talk about and showcase different types of comics. And I'm very cognizant of that, because I don't want the manga kid to feel left out, or the alternative comics kid to feel left out, or the superhero kid to feel left out, or the European comics interested person to feel left out. I try to get all types of different comics into my lectures, and because they're all comics and we're talking about the mechanics of comics, they all use those mechanics of comics, whether they're manga or American or European or bande dessinée or what have you. So I really try to add a big mix of different types of comics when I am teaching. And so, that might have helped me or not. I'm not sure. When judging, I don't know. Judging is such a, I don't know. It's weird. It's a very personal and subjective thing.
But seeing all those comics and coming from those different standpoints, don't you think it probably gives you a more a wider, if not a more discerning palette as it relates to comics?
I don't know that I want to say that about myself. Evidently, somebody thought that because they asked me to be a judge. But I'm not gonna toot my horn about having a better or worse palette than anyone else. But I do love comics, and I do feel really honored to have been an Eisner judge and to be nominated the year after. It was both an incredible honor.
Okay, now I guess moving on a little bit to talking more about, I guess, even with the classroom. So, like, have you ever had any of your students, rise up, from, obviously learning under you to moving on to major publications, like, for DC or Marvel? It doesn't even have to be DC and Marvel. It could be something they did with Dark Horse, or even maybe deciding they were going to go the indie route.
Yeah, sure. All of the above, basically. One of my former students, Beth Sparks, was in one of my first comics classes, and she went on to illustrate some covers for Image Comics. Another one of my students, Matt Dye, has done like storyboarding for Super Bowl commercials. I've also got a number of students who have gone on to create more comics past the class, and I'll see them at conventions. We'll be exhibiting side by side or across the aisle from one another, and that's always cool to see. And so I love seeing what students will do with the class after they leave, because I never know what they've joined for, because I've had folks who are gung-ho comics and they want to make comics and that's the thing they want to do. And then I also have students who join the class just on a lark because they thought, oh, that sounds fun. And I remember there was a student who came into my class, and the first day I always go around, we'd play the name game and get to know each other. And I ask them not only their name, but why they're here. And this one student said, well, I'm only here because I couldn't get into the volleyball class. And so this one was still open. And I thought in my head, okay, this is a challenging class. And if I had to place a bet, I'm betting they're not going to stay in here.
Wow.
That was my internal monologue when that was said. But that taught me a lot because that student not only stuck around the entire class, but was one of the most ambitious students I've ever had. They took their skills in scrapbooking and started making these really complex, interesting mechanics inside the book where you'd have like these like pockets that opened up and they'd pull out these secret notes and little comics that you'd put back in and stuff that I've never seen before or after any students doing. And I feel like that was such a wake-up call to me as a professor. You never know what a student's going to bring to the classroom. Even when you think you know, even when you think you have them pegged, you don't. I don't have anyone pegged. And that was a good lesson for me.
Well, one more question. And it's funny because when you're teaching, what I found interesting is when you were talking about, you know, people going into storyboarding, because I think that a lot of people who do sequential art still really don't understand that sequential art is a wide, it has a wide range of different applications.
For sure. Yeah. And it was really interesting to see that student's storyboards compared with those final Super Bowl commercials. And it was like the director took those storyboards and just found that same exact camera angle. It was very, very interesting to see that it wasn't just like, oh yeah, we should have these couple people in the shot, but like, this is how we're directing it based directly on what this person illustrated.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's cool because with that skill, you know, what I found is that, especially with having the sequential skill and understanding, you know, how to create force and things like that, you know, you can literally, as you just said, translate that from page to screen if you know, if the storyboards are right.
Yeah, that's an option. I even like comics where you can't do that, where you do weird stuff in the comics that are not very easily translated to the screen, like odd panel arrangements, or even thinking about the format of the book and how that can contribute to the narrative itself. Like I just picked
the reading experience too. Yeah, definitely.
I just picked up this book. Is it here? Oh, I took it upstairs. It's this book about this laboratory monkey, and he finds these notes in the lab as he's trying to escape. And when he finds a note, there's these tipped in pages that are smaller than the pages of the book, and they are the notes themselves. So it's like you are encountering these notes just as the protagonist is, just as this lab monkey is. And it's like the involvement in the story becomes more visceral, it becomes more real as you're finding these artifacts just like the character themselves. So anyway, I love pushing the form of the book, which is you know, what I try to do.
Even how you put the book together, because we have another compatriot of ours who I think he used to teach at University of Vermont. He teach comic class there. He puts together books in such a way that it's a visceral experience. You know, he'll handcraft the covers. He'll do all sorts of stuff, man. But when you see it, no two books are alike, obviously, and the experience of holding that book gives you help. I think it helps with the reverence for the actual craft.
Yeah. Are you talking about John Chad by any chance?
Actually, I'm talking about. Oh man, it's not John Chad. It's Wade Simpson.
Okay.
Wade Simpson. Yeah.
So that actually brings up the questions. We talked a lot about, of course, you know, with you having experience judging, and then of course, you know, you make comics yourself. You know, what to you is a good comic? Like, I know that's such a broad question, but I just want to start there.
Sure. I mean, it's all kinds of fancy alchemy that makes it happen, right?
Right.
It's everything from the story. You got to have a good narrative, something that's compelling, something that makes people feel, something that makes people feel connected to a character and root for them or root against them or complicate them in some way where you're torn between, are they an antagonist? Are they a protagonist? Should I root for them or not?
Right.
I mean, so that's the start. But then, of course, comics aren't just words; they're art too.
Sure. They're married together. Yeah.
Is the artwork interesting to look at? And even more important than whether or not the artwork is interesting to look at, but is the page first and foremost easy to read?
Right.
Then after that, does it do interesting things? Do panels contribute to the narrative of the story too? Is the whole entire package considered? Like after the comics pages are completed, then what have they done to package the book itself? Like publication design, what does that look like? So what makes a good comic? All that.
Right.
And when I first started making comics and I thought about that question, like what makes a good comic? I want to make a good comic. It was like, it's all this stuff. It's so overwhelming. What do I do?
That question alone is the overwhelming question.
Right. Yeah. But I think some things happen as you are making comics over time.
Right.
One, like I can look back at my publications and see what singular thing I was working on that publication. Like for a long time, my environments were really not good. And so I have a publication where I was really focusing on environments. There's also things that I needed to work on where each publication I was thinking, okay, I'm working on this thing. So I think as you're starting out, it's nice to think, all right, what do I need most work in and focus on that for a publication? Not just like, oh, I'm going to sketchbook this to death and do it, but like,
definitely
make something that you can produce and share and sell and monetize. That is all really important to do. And then as you continue doing that, those things that you were working on start becoming not something you have to like cognizantly consider, but like they become ingrained to the point where you're just sort of like, they become innate to you. They feel innate. They feel like you've always known them.
It's a level of muscle memory almost.
Right. Exactly. So it becomes less overwhelming because more of that becomes a part of you and a part of your process where you don't even need to consciously think about it. It just becomes part of your decision-making process. Like, yes, I know that I need an establishing shot at the start here because none of my readers understand where they are yet. And that's going to tell them where they are. So yeah. I think it gets a little easier as you continue doing this comics thing.
Right. I like to tell, like a lot of my students, I like to tell them basically there's one main principle that I try to explain to them is I don't care how much money you're making. I don't care, about any of that. If you're not, you're in this to have fun. And to me, I think that's the driving principle for any type of creative endeavor. Is having fun, but a lot of people,
I'm one of his students, so he does say that.
If you're not having fun, what's the point?
Totally. And if you're not, it's going to come through on the page. And
exactly. I think it's absolutely going to come through on the page. Yeah.
I used to have this not healthy outlook about making comics, and my not healthy outlook was I'm not a process person, and if I could will the comics into existence, I would do that. But I think that was a really unhealthy outlook for a long time because it got to the point where I would like sit down to do comics and I was kind of like, this is not, I wasn't having fun. And I really had to like recalibrate my outlook to be like, okay, I'm sitting down to make comics, and this discovery process is fun, and I'm making decisions, and there's interesting things happening, and the process itself is also fun. I do like having an end product too, but the process itself is also discoverability and fun too.
To me, like nothing feels better when you get to that page where you've written like a character may feel a certain way, but you've written them in that particular page the way they get a chance to show their humanity, and you'll draw that perfect panel where they show their humanity. Somebody might be giving somebody a hug or something like that. Those are the little moments for me, comic wise, that to me those are real payoffs.
For sure. Yeah, no doubt.
Okay, now we're at the halfway point of this interview. So real quick, I want to go ahead and of course give a quick plug in to our sister podcast, the Honeycomb Hideout. So the Honeycomb Hideout, think of it as Howard Stern for geeks. Best place if you want to check out any news on Imagino, so you want to hear anything related to the industry, where we talk about industry talks, anything related to heavy hitting topics. You will check that out with Joe and Christine. There will be links down below for you to be able to check that out. It's on Apple Podcasts. I believe it's on Spotify, YouTube. You can find it on all the major podcast platforms. So make sure you guys check that show out. Make sure you give it a follow. And now we are going to get back to our interview. So I want to make sure this is way more personal. I want it to be really personal, not too personal, obviously. I don't want to go too crazy, but like personal to your work in comics is what I mean.
Sure.
And of course, one of the things that, where you got your, really big debut is from doing your comic, back in the day, and then One More Day. So that was more of an audio biographical type work that you did. So I kind of wanted to know, like, what even inspired you to do that? I know a lot of times when people do comics in today's environment, especially in manga, me and Mark talk about a lot of people who try to do escapism instead with a lot of their work. But you went the other way and you made it more personal to yourself, which I really enjoy when I see that. So can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So my first comic that I ever made was an autobiographical one, as Irvin said. It's called it's called And Then One Day.
And One Day, sorry.
And that series started out as sort of a page-a-day format, where each page was a different day from my life, sort of like a diary in comic book form. And the reason I started with that as my first comic is because, well, a couple things. I originally read comics as a kid, 6, 7, 8 years old. I was originally reading the Disney Duck books, and then eventually got into satirical books from Sergio Aragonés, like Gru. And then when I got to high school, I kind of stopped reading comics.
I've heard about that one.
And then at the tail end of college, a buddy of mine asked me, I was lucky enough to have a car my senior year of college. And he said, hey, would you take me to the comic book store? I'm like, oh yeah, I used to do that. So I accompanied him to our local store, and I was just bumming around waiting for him basically. And I pulled this book off the shelf from Sergio Aragonés. I'm like, oh, this is my old favorite cartoonist. I wonder what he's been up to. And just on a whim, I bought it, and it was all over from there. Like, I was back into comics in a very heavy way and started reading voraciously. And I was freshly out of undergrad from an art studio program. And so naturally my inclination is, okay, how do I start making these things? And started teaching myself as best I could, because there weren't really comics courses around. And I also started meeting with anybody and everybody in the comics industry who would give me the time of day. I got in touch with Tom Luth, who was Sergio Aragonés' colorist for many years. We had lunch together. We chat comics. We talked coloring. JG Rochelle from Comic Craft. It's one of the top tier comic book lettering services in the industry. He just happened to live in my hometown. And so I wrote him and we had lunch together. So like any way I could cobble together some comics education, I was doing that. And that led to an internship at Marvel Comics, where I was not only doing that internship in the summer of 2002, 2003, somewhere around there. But I was also taking classes at the Joe Kubert School of Cartooning, and just, again, trying to get access to comics information any way I could. And when I was getting back into comics in a big way, I found myself gravitating toward nonfiction comics, autobio comics, historical fiction comics, that sort of thing is really what got me charged up when I was reading. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll try my hand at this autobio stuff. And in retrospect, that page a day format was really great for me because I didn't have 24 pages or 100 pages to finish before I had something complete. When I finished a page, that was done. That was a strip that was complete. And so at the end of finishing every single page, I was like, oh, wow, I feel great. I feel this sense of accomplishment. And I kept doing that and kept doing that to the point where I got more comfortable doing more pages and started working on projects that were longer. But that initial project of having those single page strips, I think was super helpful to make me feel a sense of accomplishment.
Sure.
If you try to tackle a graphic novel your first time out, it's like you haven't exercised that muscle yet. You haven't climbed.
Yeah, look, a lot of these people go for that magnum opus, and I'm like, you haven't even done the calisthenics yet.
Yep. And that's exactly how I form my class too. Right. The first assignment is a 2 to 3 page artist statement comic. Right. The next one expands those pages a little bit. It's a 5 to 7 page wordless comic. And that last assignment is a 7 to 10 page comic that's open-ended in terms of theme. So it's like they're slowly building up. And then when they make their way to the advanced class, it's even longer. And it's funny because they've done these short story projects in the intro class that I teach. Right. And then when they get to the advanced class, they're not making any more pages than they did in the intro class. But exactly. But it's one longer length narrative. And because of that, it feels so much more overwhelming. And there's an entirely different feeling to that class, way that I need to approach large project productivity and coach them through that and check in with them on a much more frequent basis. Because as you know, you can't cram comics, right? You can't make your 24-page comic the night before. I mean, there's a thing called 24-hour comics day, but you can kind of tell. So if you want to make something good, you need to spend some time on it.
It's funny because like one thing with 24-hour comics is that if it shows that whether you know your craft or not.
True. Yeah. Well, the mechanics are there.
The mechanics are there, absolutely.
So when it comes to like, I guess the comics that you work on now, over the years, has there been any like major changes to your process, especially, given the fact that, you have technology that evolves? I can imagine maybe at one point you might have done, I don't know if you still do traditional or not, but you may have done traditional, then you might have evolved into doing more digital. Like, how has your process developed, and what, like, nowadays do you think works for you when you're doing comics versus what you used to do?
I love process, so I love this question. So stop me if I talk too much, okay? Feel free to jump in anytime. But I started by cutting up my own paper and like getting out the rulers and ruling out the panels. And eventually I got to a place where, so in my early days of making comics, I was in my like early to mid 20s, I'd say, when I first started making comics. I was also fresh out of undergrad. I was also teaching fresh out of undergrad, and I was teaching graphic design programs like Photoshop, Illustrator, web tools, stuff like that. And so these like Adobe programs felt like extensions of my body. Like I work with them all the time. I was doing graphic design work. I was very familiar with them. And so I started paneling out my comics in Adobe Illustrator. So I would set up a template of the exterior page size and then the exterior panel size. And then I would have these like markers along the side where I could basically pull out a series of gutters and split the page in half, or split the page in thirds, or split the page in fourths, etc., either on the side or from the top, vertical columns. And I could lay out a page a lot quicker like that. And I wouldn't have to like go through and erase everything if something wasn't quite in the right place. And it allowed me to type in and position speech balloons and get them just where I needed to, so that I could take that and print that out on Bristol in blue line.
Right.
So non-reproductive blue pencil.
Right, non-repro blue, yeah.
Yep. So non-reproductive blue pencil is nothing magical. It sounds magical because it's a big old word, but basically it's light blue pencil. And the reason that works is because, well, to rewind a little bit so people know what that is, basically if you have non-repro blue pencil underneath your inks and you scan it into the computer, you don't have to erase it. You can obliterate it in Photoshop and not have to worry about erasing everything. So all that is light blue. It's less than 50% gray, and what Photoshop will do is take everything that's 50% gray and up and make it black, everything that's 50% gray and below and make it white, and that's how you get a nice clean page of comics. So I printed it out in non-repro blue or light blue so I wouldn't have to worry about it later, and then I'd hand pencil everything, and then I'd hand ink everything, scan it back into the computer, and then digitally color it. My process has changed a little bit in more recent years, and I've started to digitally pencil as well. So I still do that Adobe Illustrator layout for panels and speech balloons, but then I'll take that into Clip Studio Paint where I will digitally pencil everything. And that allows me that ultimate editability where if I draw something, I can kind of move it around independently of anything else in that panel or resize it or whatever I need to do. So that ultimate editability, I was going to say enjoy, but there's also like a crux where there's like so many things that can be done. You can kind of noodle it into perfection and get a little obsessed over it. And I'm trying not to do that. Anyway,
control's not a bad thing.
Right. I mean, we're comics artists. We like control, right? That's why we do everything. So, nowadays, my comics, I will pencil in Clip Studio Paint, as I mentioned, and then I will print that out in blue line and hand ink everything.
All right, that's cool. That's really cool. The hybrid process.
Yes, exactly. And I do that for a couple reasons. One, I'm an old man now, and I've become accustomed to hand inking to the point where, like, if I'm inking on a glass surface, there's this, like, element of removal of your pencil from where the pixels show up, but there's also this element of like smoothing to the line. And for my work, I want like a little bit of organic wobble and wiggle to it because most of my stories are like very human oriented, and I want you to see that there's a hand behind this process. So ultimately, I just can't get the control over digital inks that I can in physical inks. But the second reason I do that is because you cannot monetize a digital print.
True.
You can monetize original artwork.
Sure.
And so one of my recent comics, A Hunter's Tale, this was a poem about empathy that my grandfather wrote over 40 years ago at this point. Thank you. Awesome. Thanks for putting that up, Irvin. So you can look at the Kickstarter campaign for that comic book, and I had a tier for original artwork, and every single page of that book sold. And if I did not have original artwork for that book, I would have left literally thousands of dollars on the table. It's all public information. Go to that Kickstarter campaign, do a little bit of math, and you'll see that, you know, without that, lots of money would have been gone. So for twofold: one, control of inks; two, an ability to monetize your skills further past just the printing of the book itself.
All right. So I'm going to ask you this question, and then you might want to ditch our podcast forever. This is the thing. So you know that what I do, there's a paper texture that I use on the iPad and on the Surface Pro. So that gives me just enough give back to where it feels like I'm actually drawing and inking on paper.
Yes, I am familiar with those screen overlays, and I don't know, Mark. I think I'm just going to out old man you on this one and keep
I'm with
physically inking.
I'm with you. I'm saying that for the younger crowd who's looking for curmudgeons, you know.
Yes, the great thing about comics is that there's no one right way to make them.
Right.
There's like an infinite number of ways to make comics.
Absolutely.
And after you try, the millions of ways to make them, you kind of get comfortable with a particular way.
Yeah, exactly.
And you find out what works best for you.
Yeah,
so that's what works best for me. But
All right. So something else that I want to ask you about that's very important. Actually, this is something that Mark gets on, I'm going to say me and some of the other younger guys in our group, about, and it has to do with conventions. How important do you feel it is to go to conventions as a creator, especially in today's time? And, what do you do for, when you go to conventions, for like table setup, how do you, not any secrets, but like, how do you market yourself from your perspective and, that type of thing?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I hope I don't go against the grain of Mark too much here, but here we go. So essentially you were asking first, how important is it to exhibit at in-person conventions versus other stuff you can do online, like run a Kickstarter campaign or be interviewed on a podcast, or join some online groups, some online artist groups. And that could be in terms of like a Facebook group where people are sharing work, or it could be like a Zoom group that meets periodically and you all draw together and you get to know one another a little better. So is something better or worse? I think all those things are good. I have heard folks say that you don't need to do conventions anymore. I think it's a thing of the past. You're not going to make your money back. They're not worth doing. I've heard that. But I don't think I'm to that degree of separation from conventions. I think that there are ways to make more money than at conventions, like on a Kickstarter campaign, because you don't have to pay for a table. You don't have to pay for hotel. You don't have to pay for gas or lodging or food, etc. There's a lot of expenses associated with conventions that start to pile up, and it makes it difficult to turn a profit like that. When I was first making comics, my goal was to break even at conventions. And that may sound like a losing game, but I think there is a real value in being face to face with someone and shaking their hand and talking to them in person and showing them the physical product that you have. And very importantly, if you are doing conventions, put out a sheet of paper at your convention table and collect email addresses.
Yep, I concur.
Young artists come to me frequently saying, what should I do to build my fan base, to make a better career in the arts for myself? And the number one suggestion I have for them all the time is start your email list. And I was very lucky in that somebody very early in my comics career told me to do this, and they said you should start an email list. I was making comics for maybe a year, probably not even at that point, and I said to them, oh no, that sounds kind of salesy and schmarmy. I don't think I want to do that. And they said, no, look, just take a piece of paper, put it on your convention table, let it sit out there. You don't even need to say anything about it. If people like your work, they'll sign up.
They're going to do it.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, that sounds passive enough where I'm willing to do that. And I put it out there, and to my surprise, people started signing up for it. And I thank my lucky stars that I did, because that email list has now built to the point where I just published the biggest, baddest book of my entire career. It is a 260-page behemoth with all the bells and whistles of printing you can think of, from cloth bound covers to dual foil stamping on front, spine, and back, gilded edges, built-in ribbon bookmarks, and that's just the cover. Inside there's like gate folds, there's vellum overlays, there's die cut reveal. I could go on and on about print terminology and all the stuff.
You have to kick all the tires, huh?
And I mention all this to say, not to toot my own horn, but to say the only reason I was able to make a big bad book like that as a self-publisher is because of that email list, because I made that email list and continued to grow it over the course of 20 years to the point where I've now got a loyal readership who's willing to come along with me on these weird comic book rides that I take them on, and they get to see this wild and wacky product at the end of it. So getting back to the convention question, yes, I still think it's valuable. And if you decide to do that, make sure that you're collecting email addresses. The only time I ask people for their email address nowadays is, and your mileage may vary on this, but this is my comfort level. I put out that email list. Sometimes they sign up on their own, but sometimes a person will come by and we'll have a great conversation about comics. Sometimes they'll buy something. And at the end, I'll just let them know, hey, I don't know if you're interested, but I send an email out every other month, letting you know about new books coming out and convention appearances and stuff like that. And 90% of the time, they're like, yeah, I'd love to hear about that. So now I'm a little less passive about it than I was originally because I understand the importance of it. So anytime I get a chance to pull someone into that email list, I take that opportunity to do so, because that's your direct contact with your readership, not social media, not screaming from the mountain that's going to be algorithmed away and disappear and who knows how long. But if someone's willing to share their email with you, that's typically the thing that does not change. Social media platforms are coming and going, as we're seeing in recent days, and it's not to say don't use them at all, but it's to say their effectiveness is not quite what it was.
Their mileage may vary.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And you also build community like that, though, too. That's what I think is important, is building community.
For sure. And it reminds people that you exist. Just because the algorithm filters out what you do to a great many people doesn't mean that some people aren't going to see it. So remind people that you're out there and making work and doing interesting things. And then when it's time to release a project, they're like, oh, yeah, I've seen Ryan. He's been working on that book for a while. Oh, yeah, I've seen this come to fruition. And they feel like they've kind of been along on the ride for it.
Right.
All right, so we're starting to wind down just a bit now. We only have a little bit more time left. So I'm going to ask you a question that has to do kind of with, what a lot of our audience on here, and Shining Spotlight, a lot of the viewers are into. So a lot of people these days, we know are into manga. They like to read manga, especially a lot of the younger crowd. And, therefore, a lot of them like to create their own manga.
Sure.
So I'm curious, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but what is your take on original English language manga or manga inspired comics? Like, what is your opinion of how that is today, or the type of comics that people make that are manga inspired? If you understand my question.
I think so. And I would not call myself a manga aficionado, but I've certainly read my fair share of manga. It's not what I go to first, but I've definitely read quite a number of them. And like I said, include examples in my class. Sure. And to me, whether it's manga or superheroes or alternative comics or bande dessinée, they're all telling stories with this shared medium. Sure. Manga is comics. American comics are comics. They might be read in a different direction, but they're still using the same language. Yep. So I love reading stories in any language that I can understand, and I understand comics, so I understand manga and I understand American comics, etc. So yeah, I think it's just another avenue of storytelling, and it's not something that I, discriminate against or encourage. It's like, hey, if that's your thing, I want you to make that thing. If your thing is, slice of life, alternative American comics, then I want you to do that thing. If you're a superhero kid, then I want you to do that thing. Like, what's your interesting, unique take on whatever genre you want to do using this medium that we all love? And if I can help in ways of clarification or pointing people in a direction that might make their message receive the way they hope it to be, like, a lot of what we talk about in our critiques is like, okay, here's our comic, let's read it, and then give them feedback, and the creator might feel like, oh, I did not understand that that's how it was going to be read, or I did not understand that that would be a point of confusion. So maybe we need to add another panel here or explain it in a particular way. So that's really what I'm interested in helping people do, is to see their vision to fruition, not like place my personal interest on them. I want them to do in my class what they came there to do.
Right. It's funny because I kind of, I nothing I kind of live by is that, you know, as a teacher, you're what they grow beyond.
For sure.
You know,
the Last Jedi.
You know, you always want to, you know that what you're teaching them is going to get them further than you probably went. You're going to be proud of that.
Yeah.
Number one. And also, I also want to ask you, where you were talking about the manga and the different and by the and whatnot. I was going to say that one thing as comic artists, we love all comics.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We love no matter where it comes from, no matter what whatever culture it is, it's all comic stuff.
Yep. If you're a fellow weirdo putting pictures in little boxes, I want to see it.
Hand it over.
It's funny because I'm like, one thing that I kind of wonder if, and I've seen some people, you know, who create comics, like nobody really talks about the importance of lettering, you know, or how important that is. Man. You know, I feel like, you know, that's something that, I mean, I know we don't have much time now. We're getting ready to wind down. So I know we really can't touch on that too much right now, but like, is that something like, you know, that you talk about with any of your students, like lettering and, you know, kind of what goes into that?
It's the first thing I talk about with my students. It's the easiest way to raise the level of professionalism in your comics straight away. I have an initial lecture that I give them that's, maybe 45 minutes or so. And I show a couple of amateur lettering examples at the beginning of class. And I'm like, you can probably tell that this is not professional, but you might not be able to say why. Like, what are the things that make this amateur? But in the next, 30 to 45 minutes, we're going to go through that. And at the end, I put that same picture up and I'm like, okay, so why is this an amateur lettering example? And they can list them all off. They've been taking notes. They know exactly what's going on and what they would change to make it more professional. And that moving forward is really empowering to them. So yes, I definitely talk about lettering because I had a really fortunate experience when I was interning at Marvel Comics in New York City. I'm not sure if folks are aware of this or not, but there's no in-house talent at any of the big two anymore. It's just like production staff and stuff like that. But when I was there, the last in-house letterer was still working there. And so his name was Dave Sharp, and he was this like big metal looking guy with like long scraggly hair and, goatee. And I was just, some little kid from California, like, hey, Dave, any chance you could show me some lettering stuff? And every day I'd come into Marvel, I'd ask him that. And he'd be like, yeah, I'm busy today. Come back in a couple days. So I'd come back. Hey, Dave, same thing. This would repeat for weeks on end until one day Dave stuck his head out of the office and he's like, hey, Ryan, come here. Like, here is an issue of Inhumans. Letter it. And I'm like, okay, do you have any like direction or anything? Like, nope, just do it. Bring it back. We'll talk about it. So I lettered all 20 some odd pages of it, brought it back to Dave, and he went through page by page, panel by panel, balloon by balloon, and told me exactly what I was doing wrong. And that was such an education. And I bring that with me, not only to every comic that I make, but also the classes that I teach too. I just feel like I was so fortunate to have that experience. And then, of course, I went through, corrected, brought it back again, had some minor corrections after that. It was just like this huge learning experience doing that internship at Marvel and getting to learn stuff that I never thought I was going to get to learn. So yeah, it was great.
Wow, that's a gem to even hear that story.
I
enjoyed that.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, here's the final question that we're going to ask. It's our traditional question, kind of a little bit of play on Avengers Endgame a little bit. What is your end game at the end of your career? What is it that you want your career to look like? How do you imagine it to be? What's your plan? What is your end game?
I think you're looking at it. I mean, my end game is to keep making comics. Like my end game is not to make an end all be all book and then sign off and never be seen again. I love making comics. I love the medium and how it informs other media.
Right.
Like I work in media outside of comics, but also comics. It's a part of my life, and I want to keep doing it for as long as I possibly can. Like as long as my eyesight's here, as long as my physicality is present, and I can keep doing this thing, that's what I want to keep doing. And so, what's my end game? I'm doing it. This is such a blessing to be able to do and to teach and to talk about. I don't know. I just love it.
Ryan is living the dream.
Well, thank you so much, Professor, for your time. Before we head out, obviously there's I believe there was an announcement, because you have your Kickstarter. At this time, when everybody's watching this, the Kickstarter should be out.
Yes.
So I want to say, make sure you guys support that, like 1,000%. Show it any support. You can either put into the Kickstarter. If you don't put in, at least share it. It don't cost you nothing to share it. That's all I'm gonna say. Share it around, spread it.
I appreciate that. The project is called Elephant Eater Comics Annual Dispatch, and this is a follow-up to the Eisner nominated book that you put on the screen a little bit ago. So that art book was that big crazy book I was talking about earlier, and essentially, instead of waiting another 20 years to put out another book like that, I'm hoping to share what I'm doing on an annual basis with less pages, but in a larger format.
Sure.
In newsprint. So this is going to be a newsprint edition of what I've been up to over the course of the past year, and with a heavy emphasis on process. So it's not just like a pretty picture on a page, but it's paired with a page of like a little bit of didactic text, but mostly images showing how each piece came to be.
Sure.
So I'm super proud of this. I'm working on this masthead that I just finished up, and you can see on the campaign page right now. And I hope people go take a look at it. So thank you for mentioning that too. Elephant Eater Comics Annual Dispatch.
Elephant Eater Comics Annual Dispatch. Make sure you guys support that. Like I said, share it around. Tell your friends. Tell your family. Tell your local comic shop. Is there any chance that this book, after it's out, will it ever be on in Barnes and Noble or anything like that? Is it going to have any other distribution?
I don't think the Dispatch will be, because it's sort of a pamphlet newspaper type of thing, so it doesn't have a spine, but it's going to be incredibly cool. I've always wanted to work in newsprint, and
so this is like going to be a real exclusive.
Yeah, this is the first time I've been able to do it, so I'm super excited about it.
Okay, well, make sure you guys support Professor Claytor on this, of course, and then also make sure you guys go to his pages as well, so you can go to elephanteater.com. Obviously you see that right there. There's going to be links. Do you have Instagram or anything like that people should check out?
Yeah, I've got a bunch of that stuff. If you go to elephanteater.com/contacts, there's a contacts button on the page.
Good.
Everything is there. All my socials, my email list, anything you need is there.
Sure.
Okay. Well, thank you for watching. Before we head out, hold on just for one quick second, Professor. Just have one quick thing that we had to announce ourselves. Of course, you guys know about Origami Super Punch. That's obviously, been available. There's been a few issues with, us with Indie Planet getting it up, but those of you guys who have it, and then, it should be available now for a lot of you guys to pick up and see. We will be coming out with Origami Super Punch #2, which is another, continuation of all these following stories that you see here. And there'll be some other stories listed in there as well that, maybe some of you guys are not familiar with. So make sure you support that as well. And make sure you guys give this video a like. It always helps. And share this video around. with that being said, we want to again, thank Professor Claytor for his time, and we're going to go ahead and sign off.
One more thing.
Wait.
Yeah, one more thing for me too. I want to say thank you for having me on here. I super appreciate the conversation. This has been super fun. I hope I didn't talk too much. Thank you for having me on here.
Like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed, especially the story we were talking about when you were at Marvel as an intern and you're sitting there learning the lettering. I don't know why that I'm like, I could picture it in my head the way you're telling the story. I'm like, you're a true storyteller, of course. So.
So what I want to talk about is we are going to be doing a contest for entries, manga entries into Origami Super Punch number 3. Actually, so we're going to be getting a little bit more information about that soon, but there's going to be a $300 cash prize to the winner.
Yes, so a lot of you guys are going to want to be a part of that. It's going to be very exciting, to see everyone be able to submit their comics and, put your best foot forward. We want to see it. Anybody have anything else that they want to announce or say before we head on out?
I'm good.
Okay, just hang on real tight, Professor. Once we sign out, we'll see you in just a minute. But with that being said, everybody, you guys have a great night and see you guys in the next video.